In this video, I figured I would cover a topic that a lot of videos talk about on the internet, and that is katanas. There's a lot of stuff that I read online regarding katanas, and some people absolutely despise katanas because they're so overexposed, they're so talked about that people just kind of get sick and tired of them. There's other people that absolutely worship them and think that they're the greatest thing ever and the greatest weapon ever invented, and that they have these magical powers and can do anything. Obviously, I figured I would do a video on katanas just to talk about a little bit about them and clear up some misconceptions, again, stuff that I see online where people are doing things incorrectly. Probably the most noticeable thing with katanas, I see a lot of videos online where people are talking about, for example, katana versus longsword or broadsword. Some of the advantages of, is it better to have two edges on a sword? Is it better to have one edge on a sword? How does that matter? Are two edges better than one? If you've seen a katana before, then you know that it's sharpened on only one side of the blade. And if you look at the other side of the blade, you can see that it's very thick on the other side. So really what you're getting is as much force or as much mass as you can put into that blade as possible to be able to slice with the sharp side. If you put two edges on a blade, for example, then immediately you have to make the blade wider, right? Because you have to grind both sides of the blade down to an edge. And that means that now you've got a wider blade. That means that you either have to really thicken up the middle of that blade in order to bring it down to an edge on either side, or the blade is going to wobble. It's going to be a very thin, very flaky blade. It's going to have wobble to it. A katana, for example, does not wave or wobble back and forth. It's absolutely rigid. So that's one difference right away, is that to put two edges on a sword, you have to make it a bigger sword. And that means that you then have to make a heavier sword to have something that is the same length as a katana. And so that's, right away, if you look at a katana blade is a lot thinner, for example, than a broadsword or a longsword. So you're getting the greatest amount of mass that you can while still keeping the sword lightweight, so that you're getting maximum cutting power when you use it. So that, again, that is one strength of a katana that I like. If you look at a broadsword, for instance, or longsword, something that is sharpened on both sides, you're only ever really using one side of the blade anyway. You typically don't cut with the inside portion of the blade, right? You're usually cutting with the outside portion anyway. So is there an advantage to having the two edges? Perhaps if one side gets damaged badly enough, you can simply turn the sword over and then cut with the, you basically have a new edge again at that point. But otherwise, really, between the two of them, really no advantage one way or the other. Another thing that I see with videos online when it comes to katanas is you will see people cutting, and when they cut, they'll be cutting, like down here on the blade somewhere. And that point is known as the maximum percussion point. It's the area on the blade where you have the greatest amount of cutting force. And while that is true, that part of the blade does give you the greatest amount of force in a cut, that is not how you use a katana, again, in battle. That is not how you would use it in a real fight. So, this is, one of those things that just kind of drives me crazy when I see it. But even though this would be the part of the blade that would do the greatest amount of damage, you're only actually using the last 3 or 4 inches of the blade when you cut. Why is that the case? Because when you are fighting somebody, let's say you're in a sword fight, I don't want to get that close to you when I'm able to cut you from here with the end of that blade, right? Distance matters. That's why when you fight with a sword, you're holding that blade out as far as you can away from your body. You're using the full length of that blade. You're trying to cut with just the very tip of that sword. You're not trying to cut somebody down here on the blade. Even though it's sharp all the way down, you don't want somebody to get that close to you. You want to be cutting them up here, up at the tip. So, like again, you don't have to cut through 4 dead pigs or whatever example people want to use with the blade. You cut somebody here with the tip of this blade, you open up a gash 2 or 3 inches deep and draw it all the way across their body. They're gone, right? They're as good as gone. So this idea that you always see people chopping with the sword and they're getting into here, no, absolutely not. In a real fight, you're down here on the blade. You're using only the tip, right? You want to use the tip. You want to keep your opponent as far away from you as possible and open up a cut with that, and believe me, it gets the job done. You don't have to get closer than that. So, again, that's one of the things I want to say. And, another thing, some people wonder, like, can you dual wield katanas? Like, could you hold one in either hand and swing with them? You can use a katana one-handed, but it doesn't feel very heavy in your hand when you first pick it up, admittedly. Most katanas are maybe 2-3 pounds, whatever. They feel very light. When you first pick them up, they're very light. But as soon as you start swinging them around, as soon as you start to use them, they get heavy in your hand very, very quickly. So yes, there are some techniques that are done with one hand, and yes, you will occasionally see people fight and they will have a sword in one hand, a sword in the other hand or whatever, but it's not a full-size katana. It's usually a katana in one hand and a smaller, shorter sword in the other hand, or just something in the weaker hand. But again, it's it's not commonly done. A katana is intended to be a two-handed weapon. If you try using it with one hand, I mean, feel free. Go out and buy a katana. You can get them for a few $100s. Try practicing. Even with 2 hands on a katana, you will get fatigued very quickly. If you try using it with one hand, your technique is going to get sloppy very, very fast, and you're going to get exhausted very, very quickly. So it's, it is something that is done occasionally, but for the most part, it is a two-handed weapon, and you're going to get the best results out of it using it as a two-handed weapon. And again, remember, just using the tip of the blade, that is the target area for a katana. Thanks.